Yo, what's good? What's happening, Rush Nation? Welcome to episode 94 of 5 Yard College. I realise it has been a hot minute since you've heard my dulcet tones down your ear holes, or if you are joining us on the live stream, welcome in. If you're not joining us on the live stream, don't forget to head over to YouTube, hit the like and subscribe button, and also the bell, so when 5 Yard Rush does go live, you know when we're there, come over and join the fun. Ash, feels like it's been months. It's only been 2 weeks, 3 weeks. What we've done is we've had a hard reset here at 5 Yard College. We've had some stuff get in the way. Ash was away, then I got sick, then my eyes stopped working. But we've managed to come through the back end of that. Ash, after all this time, how you doing, bud?
Yeah, I'm doing good. We are finally back. Like you say, I can't remember if it's been 2 or 3 weeks, but yeah, it's been a while, but we are back. Still deep into the pre-season, but there is definitely lots to talk about.
Yeah, I keep seeing the NFL posts on my Facebook feed saying how many days. They put the picture of a player up with like how many days left to go. It's only 7 weeks or something ridiculous, which means week 0 is even less than that, right?
Yeah, I think week 0. Maybe I can't remember when week 0 is. I had it in front of me not long ago. I think it's about a month.
You're away the first.
Yes.
Is it only?
Yeah.
Is it really only 4 weeks?
Yeah, it's just over 4 weeks until we are go time, full go.
Goodness gracious me, that is crept up on us very, very quickly. So
Yeah.
with the time missed, we can only apologise, guys, but we are breaking down the conferences today. We're going to start with the big dogs of college football. It was only fair that we start with the SEC, and that way we can get all our talking done out the way. And then when it comes to the smaller conferences, maybe we can, sort of crush them together a little bit and save some time there, because we do realise we are several weeks behind schedule now, but we will endeavour to do our best to catch up and bring you up to speed just before week 0, and then week 1 when Ash is away. So Ash has planned his trip to America perfectly for the start of the college football season. So that's going to be good. Ash, there's been lots of news. There is no news in today's show because we're talking about the SEC, and you and I get away on tangents. So we're gonna negate the news today, and perhaps we'll do some news later on at some point in the coming weeks, or certainly next week we'll do some news, and we'll get into some more conferences.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there's been some goings on around the conferences, that's for certain. But yeah, we'll focus on as you say, the big dogs, the SEC this week.
Yeah, I mean, conference realignment is huge in college football news right now, but we haven't got time to cover that and start the breakdown. So we're going to start in the East. We're going to start with the number 1 team in college football, and that is the Georgia Bulldogs. Last season, they were 8-0 in the conference, finished 14-1 overall. They were semi-final college football, semi-final Orange Bowl. They beat Michigan 34-11. Then they were national championship winners against Alabama, having lost to the Alabama in the SEC championship game. That was their only loss last year, which they righted pretty much straight after. And Ash and I said it in the season, though, it's very difficult to win 2 games against the same team in college football, because once you've played them once, they know what you're about, and then the coaching staff can bring you up to speed and make a different game plan. And it tends to be the team that lost the first one wins the second. Well, in my experience, that's what I've come across anyway. And somebody like Kirby Smart it's in the last name. It's he's going to get that right, and he got it right in the big way in the Natty, Ash.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, I think everyone saw for most of the season that Georgia were the main team, the big team in America in college football, and they proved that in the biggest game. Like you say, obviously they did lose the SEC title game against Bama, but when it really mattered, they won the national championship against them with the team. And as I say, most of us expected that from the way they played all year. That defense was unbelievable, and the offense did more than enough to get them over the line when the defense was doing their hard work. I don't know. I think I've lost.
I'm still here. I don't know what's happening.
Just your screen went black.
Yeah, I don't know what happened, but I'm still here. Don't panic. Don't panic. Yeah. it was. I know Tom was very excited with the whole season as it came and went, but Georgia, it would have been very interesting to see with the defense, as you said, as good as it was last year, how they would have held up against an NFL team with what we saw drafted in the NFL draft last year. Maybe their offense would have struggled against the top tier defense, but the defense would have severely helped their case in a game against an NFL team. And they're one of the best teams I've seen in recent years. And Ash, your prediction, you've got them 12-0 this season coming, so nothing much changes for the Bulldogs.
No. I looked through their schedule a few times, and I really can't see anyone that they're coming up against being able to beat them. There's a few potential teams there, like in week 10, Tennessee. I think will give them a good game. I've picked out 3 key games to sort of focus on for the year, starting off with the first week 1 game, which is their main out of conference game against Oregon. Now, I don't think Oregon are as good as they were last year, but they are still a team that people need to pay attention to, and one of the top teams in the Pac-12, and it's going to give Georgia a real good test to start off this season with all of the losses that they had on mainly on defense, but they also lost a few key pieces on offense as well, in particular at the running back position. But that week 1 game against Oregon is going to be crucial for them in terms of how well they start this season. I don't see them, as I said, my prediction is that they will go 12-0, so I don't see them losing to Oregon, but I think that will be one of their biggest challenges before the postseason, which I fully expect them to get to. You've also then got in week 3, they're away to South Carolina, who are a bit of a wild card team this year. Obviously, we'll get onto them a bit later, but they've made some key additions. They've got a good infrastructure in terms of the coaching staff there and the way that they play. And they've added, obviously, some big players to that. So I think that game in week 3 away for Georgia will be a huge game for them. And then the other game I've highlighted is week 9 against Florida. Again, a team that in the last couple of years have struggled and left quite a lot to be desired. But I really don't know what to expect from Florida in particular this year, but they have got some big players there that could cause Georgia a few problems. And that is another game that they need to be mindful of. But one game that I didn't put on here is obviously week 10, the Tennessee game, who Tennessee have done an unbelievable job in this offseason, not just with their coach and staff changes, obviously, of all the issues that they had last year with Halpit, I think it was, but also the new players that they brought in through recruitment and through the transfer. It's going to be a real big test for Georgia to get to close out the year. Obviously, week 10 is getting in touch and distance of the final few weeks, and it will, at that point, we'll know where this team is. But as I said, I don't expect them to be anywhere else but top of the East Division and the top team, one of the top teams in the SEC.
Yeah, no, I think you're bob on. I think that first week against Oregon, Georgia are going to need to not necessarily start fast, but they're going to need to continue their vein of form from last year. And as we know, Oregon are no joke, regardless of who they're playing. And then I think the week 10 game against Tennessee, you mentioned what a great job they've done in the off season. I think by week 10 we will know as much about Tennessee as we will about the Georgia Bulldogs. And I think by week 10, if Hendon Hooker, who we're going to talk about in a little bit, and the Tennessee Volunteers can roll in by week 10, they're going to give Georgia a real test in week 10. So there's almost 4 games you could point out there, and it almost gets to that point you mentioned at that point at week 10. That's getting down to the money line there. That's going to be make or break for the Natty Championships and so forth. So yeah, they've got some good games, Georgia. I think there's going to be some tests, but like you, I do think they are still one of, if not the best team in college football because of how they're built. And obviously we talk about the key players, Ash. On offense, you've got Brock Bowers, their tight end, who showed out in a big way last year, and defense, Jalen Carter from the defensive line. Yeah,
Brock Bowers is one of the best offensive non-QB players in college football at the moment. He's such a complete tight end that he can do anything. He can attack. He can be that outlet for the quarterback, but he can also be the blocker that you need from a tight end as well. And he's got a couple of years left until he's eligible, but this year I think he's going to explode even more than he did last year. And Jalen Carter, a lot was spoken about him last year as essentially a backup second team for the Georgia with obviously that defense. He's now the main dog there alongside Nolan Smith and Keeler Ringo. He could be better than anybody we've seen come out of the Georgia defense in the 22 draft. He is that good at the defensive tackle position. I'm really excited to see what he can do as the catalyst, the key piece of this defense. And I fully expect him to be in conversation for a minimum top 3, top 5 pick come 2023. But very excited to see Jalen Carter with the Bulldogs this year.
Yeah, so we mentioned Tennessee. They are next at number 2, Ash. Their record last year, they only had 4-4 in conference and finished 7-6 overall. Their bowl game, they played in the Music City Bowl, which they lost 48-45 to Purdue. So that was a hell of a game for the Music City Bowl. They had a sort of up and down season as their records suggest last year, but they showed huge flashes.
Yeah, they did. They looked great at times and they looked disastrous at others. It was such an up and down year for them with everything going on off field as well as obviously the inconsistency on field. It's just a year really for Tennessee to forget. But like I said earlier, the changes that they've made in almost every aspect of this team and adding to the existing players from last year, there's a reason why I've put them second, and there's a reason why a lot of people are putting them second in the East Division. This isn't obviously the overall rankings. We split it down by East and West, but for me, Tennessee are the next best team in the East at the moment with everything that they've done and how they looked last year at times. I think we'll get on to it straight away. The key players, Hendon Hooker, the quarterback, is the guy there for Tennessee. Everything runs through him. He's shown what he can do last year at times. There's still some times where he does make some silly mistakes, and you do need to be mindful of him having those sort of games or passage of plays in games where he does make those mistakes. But he is such an improved player than what we saw at Virginia Tech since he landed at Tennessee last year, that I can just see him taking another step up. And if he has a good year, he's going to be in consideration for the Heisman, especially if Tennessee have a good year as well. I think he is very much an outside shot. There's 2 guys that are clear favourites for it, but Hendon Hooker will definitely be in consideration if he has a good year, like I expect. And then the next on the defensive side is Byron Young, senior. This will be his final year, outside linebacker / edge. He has impressed the majority of his career whilst being sort of not in the limelight. He's been sort of, I wouldn't say ignored, that's the wrong word, but there's not been a great deal of attention paid on him, mainly because he started off at Alabama before moving over to Tennessee. And I think now he is there, he's just gonna blow up and really be a monster for Tennessee. Everything else that they've done to improve this team, Brew McCoy is there as a wide receiver. Obviously, we've mentioned Hendon Hooker. They've got some decent running backs. It's a running back by committee here, but they've got Jabari Small, Jalen Wright. They've brought in some other young freshman running backs that look like they can improve. If Hendon Hooker does struggle or if he does get hurt, they have got Joe Milton there as a backup, who is a more than capable backup. So I wouldn't be worried too much if they lost Hendon Hooker. This whole team just seems to be gelling really well together, and I'm just really intrigued to see how they do this year. If they can perform like I expect them to, as I say, I think it's going to be a very good year for them.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head with Hendon Hooker. I think I was talking about how he could be a steal in the NFL draft as a backup and then make his way to a starter, but he didn't declare, went back for one final year, and I think he has the ability to improve again, like you said. Byron Young, exactly the same. What you said, Ash. And then we come to their key games: 5, 6, and 7. They got a run of 3 pretty stiff games. 5, they've got Florida. 6 is LSU, and then week 7 they take on Alabama.
Yeah, they've got some huge games. They really do. Just outside of that, outside of the ones that you've spoken about there, they've got Pitt in week 2. It's going to be a huge matchup for them out of conference. They've got LSU. I do see them beating LSU, but they've got some massive games. Georgia, who we mentioned in the Georgia preview a second ago, they've got some really big games. I can see them overcoming the likes of Florida and LSU and the Gamecocks. Unfortunately, it's too much this year for Bama and Georgia, but I do expect them to have a very solid year with this team, and I've put them down to go 9-3. I think that week 2 game against Pitt, and then obviously the Alabama and the Georgia games, I can see them there being their only losses in the regular season. But apart from that, as you mentioned, it's that little chunk there: Florida, LSU, Alabama. That is a massive 3 weeks for them, and I can see them doing Florida at home. I can see them beating LSU on the road, but obviously that week 7 game against Bama, I think, is just going to be a step too far for them this year.
Yeah, you got them. I don't know if you mentioned, Ash. I would like to apologise to everybody listening or watching. My internet appears to be shocking today. So I don't know whether you mentioned it, Ash, but you got them as 9-3 in the regular season.
Yeah. I do indeed. Yeah, I think that's, in my opinion, that's where they'll end up. I think it's just the Pitt, Alabama, and Georgia game that's going to be the ones that slips them up. I do need to make a correction on Byron Young. It is not the Byron Young from Alabama. It is Byron Young who's been at Tennessee last year. Was his first year. So I do need to make a correction on that. It's not the same Byron Young, but it is still he is still the main. In my opinion, him and Trayvon Flowers, the safety, are their top 2 guys on the defensive side.
Noted. Well played, sir. Didn't let that one slide this time. Right, in the East, Ash, at 3, you got the Kentucky Wildcats. Last year, they were 5-3 in conference. However, they had a 10-3 overall record, and they beat Iowa 2017 in the Citrus Bowl. Pretty good year for Kentucky last year, sort of under the radar good.
Yeah, definitely. They pulled off some really impressive results last year, and I can just see them building on that again. In particular, we spoke about it a minute ago with Hendon Hooker, but Kentucky have got arguably an even better quarterback in Will Levis, who seemed to get a lot of traction for the 2023 draft as soon as 22 ended. He's a dark horse for a lot of people, but he is a very, very good quarterback that has now got more weapons in front of him. He's got Tavion Robinson from Virginia Tech, who's joined as a transfer this year. He's still got Chris Rodriguez, question mark, because obviously of his off-field issues potentially surrounding him at the moment. But as it stands, he is still with the program. But they've got a whole host of other running backs behind Chris Rodriguez if he does have to miss any time. But bringing in Tavion Robinson as that slot receiver is going to be huge for them. They've picked up some really impressive looking freshmen recruits in Dane Key at wide receiver in particular. The offense is not something apart from Will Levis that jumps out at you. There's no one there that you go, yeah, unbelievable. Chris Rodriguez was a couple of years ago, but he has taken a little bit of a downturn. But this is going to be on Will Levis's shoulders, and I fully expect him to be able to carry this team, especially with those new additions at the wide receiver in particular. On the defensive side, you've got Tyrell Ejan, the safety. I think he's their key guy. Again, there isn't one person in particular that pops out at you on the Kentucky defense and goes, yeah, that's the key guy there. This is a really solid defensive unit that played incredibly well, even in the losses last year. That I can see only improving with an extra year underneath them. They've kept a fair amount of their players, and the ones that they have lost, they've replaced with transfers and recruits on the defensive side of things. So they, for me, it's not comfortably number 3. I think we've got 3 or 4 teams here now that we're going to be talking about that are all very close. Tennessee and Georgia are the clear 1 and 2. But for me, Kentucky have the edge just on their schedule, but also on the teams that they'll be playing around them. I just see them getting those victories. For me, I've got them down as a 7-5 team because they have got some easier opponents. They're playing Miami, Ohio, Youngstown State, Northern Illinois, Vanderbilt. I think those games are, I wouldn't say walkovers. There's no game in college football, barring a couple of teams that are walkovers, but they are considerably easier than some of the other teams around them's schedule. But they are still playing the likes of Ole Miss week 5, which is going to be a massive game. Tennessee week 9, who we've already spoken about. And then they've got Louisville, final game of the regular season, which I think is going to be a really interesting test for them. I think they will be able to beat Louisville, but it is going to be a very interesting test for them, for sure. And I think that's that and the Ole Miss, Florida, they're going to be the games where we're going to see what Kentucky are about this year. Are they the same defensively sound team that we saw in 2021-22?
Yeah, they've got the. Although they had a good year at 10-3 last year, you've got them down as 7-5, like you said. Their schedule. There's a couple of games. I mean, even the Louisville and the Missouri game, they could lose to Kentucky. They could beat Kentucky. So that could almost end up being a 6-6. Even a 5-7 record, which you would want more from somebody who's got Will Levis under center. But then, like you said, there's nobody that screams football apart from him. And if he's the guy who puts mayonnaise in his coffee, then I'm not even sure that's correct. On to number 4 in the East, you got South Carolina Gamecocks. They were 3-5 in conference last year, 7-6 overall. They played in the Duke's Mayo Bowl, which is a good segue on from the last coffee point. They did beat UNC 38-21, and obviously one of their key players is new quarterback Spencer Rattler after transferring out.
Yeah, definitely. It may be that this is that a lot of people are shouting about South Carolina just because of Spencer Rattler. People's memories are not always not always the best. I mean, you look at what Spencer Rattler did last year. He was terrible, but then 2 years ago he was unbelievable at Oklahoma. Which Rattler are we going to see at South Carolina? That is going to dictate how their whole season goes, in my opinion. But outside of Rattler, I mentioned it earlier, South Carolina have made some really good transfers in particular. They've brought in Austin Stogner from Oklahoma, tight end. They brought in Antoine Wales, the wide receiver, from James Madison in the FCS. They've added some really key pieces around Spencer Rattler's transfer as well to add to what they already had there. As I mentioned earlier, there's 4 teams in this East Division that are all incredibly close, and most of them are playing each other. South Carolina are playing Kentucky in week 6 or 7. I can't remember when the break is for them, but they are playing Kentucky. They're playing Missouri. They're playing Florida, Tennessee, Arkansas. All of these teams that are there or thereabouts with them in the SEC, they're going to be some massive games for them. Starting off week 2, they are away to Arkansas. We saw what Arkansas were last year. They were an incredibly sound defensive team that obviously we'll get onto in the West Division, but that's going to be a massive test for them to start the year. They've got some cupcake games. They start off against Georgia State. They've also got Charlotte and SC, which South Carolina State. So they have got some easier games, but they've got some massive games. They've got Arkansas, Georgia, Kentucky, Texas A&M, Tennessee, and then they finish off the year at Clemson, which I put as another key game, week 13, away to Clemson. Probably going to be a step too far for South Carolina, but I've got them 6-6. I've got them winning 6 and losing 6. And you look at their schedule, Florida and Missouri, I've put as 2 wins for them. They're going to be really tight, could go either way games. Same with Kentucky, Tennessee potentially, because we're expecting big things from them, but we don't know for sure. And then they've got some really tough games like Georgia, Texas A&M, and Clemson. So this is what I mean. South Carolina and Kentucky, and then 2 more teams that we'll speak about next, they're all so close together. It's really going to come down to when they play each other, which will dictate how they finish in this division. But South Carolina are the 4th team for me at the moment because of the schedule and also some of these new players that they brought in. I'm really intrigued to see how they all gel together. I forgot to mention Christian Beale Smith, the running back from Wake Forest, is also transferred in as well. So they've made some key offensive upgrades as well as Rattler. They've targeted in every single position: wide receiver, running back, tight end. the offensive line is potentially a question mark. There's been no real changes there, and it was very up and down last year. We saw Rattler struggle when his offensive line struggled at Oklahoma, so that is obviously going to be one concern for South Carolina this year.
Looking at this schedule that's in front of me, Ash, with the games you've got win and lost, 6-6, I think's probably bang on. And if the over/under was set at 6.5, I don't know what it's set at for South Carolina for the season win total, but I can't see them getting any more than 6. Like the 6 games you've got as a loss, I think are a loss, and Florida could easily be a loss if Florida do take a step forward under Anthony Richardson. Yeah, I'd be interested to see what the season total is on South Carolina, because I'm not sure they're going to get any more than 6 looking at that schedule.
No, I think this is probably one of the easier ones to predict based on the teams that they're playing. Kentucky is maybe the only coin flip, but I can't see them beating Arkansas, Georgia, Texas A&M, Tennessee, and Clemson. So maybe 7-5, but 6-6 I think is. But as you say, Florida and Missouri as the 2 wins are also a difficult task. But I think there will be middle of the road 6-6 this year.
So at 5, we got the Florida Gators. Last year they were 2-6 in conference and finished 6-7 overall. They lost in the Gasparilla Bowl 29-17 to UCF, which would have stung a little bit more for a local team derby. We've already mentioned Anthony Richardson, the quarterback, who's probably rightly so moved away from the AR-15 moniker and any relation to guns and stuff, although it was pretty cool and it all fitted in quite well. I think it's a sensible move on his part. And then on defense, Ash, you've got Brenton Cox Jr., the linebacker.
Yeah, I think Anthony Richardson, obviously he is the sole QB1 there now. Jack Miller from Ohio State has transferred in, but I don't see him being anything other than a backup unless Richardson gets hurt. But this should be Anthony Richardson's team to run with now, and it should be his show. The weapons around him are maybe the question marks. There's no one really. They haven't got that wide receiver, in my opinion, that we've seen come out of Florida for the last couple of years that jump out at you. This is going to be Anthony Richardson making these plays, making these wins. They do have Trevor Etienne as a freshman running back coming in, who obviously those of you know that his brother who's at Clemson. This is but Trevor is now at Florida, so he is a true freshman. He probably won't get a great deal of time, but that's definitely someone to watch out for. But for me, the defense is where they need to improve. They struggled mightily at the last couple of years, in particular last year on the defensive side. Brenton Cox is the leader of this team now. He led them last year in sacks and tackles for losses as a junior. So he's got a point to prove to show that he can continue to improve, because 2021 he had a lot of injuries, but still managed to put up a really productive year. And I expect him, as is this potentially going to be his last year. I think he will declare. But I predict him to have another great year. In terms of their schedule, I've got them as 6-6 again, and it's purely down to the teams that they're playing. There's some really difficult games in there. I have got them beating Kentucky, despite Kentucky being higher than them. I think that's going to be their big win this year. They're playing South Florida and Florida State. See them beating both of those. It's the losses that some of the teams are coming up against. They start the year week 1 against Utah. That is a huge test for Florida. I think that game and Kentucky in week 2 will show us what we're going to see from Florida this season. Are we going to see another 6-17 or 6-6 that I predicted, or are they going to take a step forward and maybe they're going to be an 8-4 or a 9-3 to push Tennessee? I don't think so, because they've also got to play Georgia, Texas. I have got Tennessee, LSU, and South Carolina all beating them, but those 3 games, maybe not so much Tennessee, but in particular LSU, South Carolina, and you can put Kentucky and Missouri from the win categories. Those 4 games are going to be huge for them finishing at 500 or above or below. but they're really close games, and I just think there's still more work for Florida to be done. They brought in some good freshmen, but they need time to gel. They're not quite there for me yet. They are still a 6-6 middle of the road team.
Yeah, I think the first 2 weeks, you already mentioned it, week 1 Utah, week 2 Kentucky. I don't think it's a case of if they can beat Utah. I think it's a case of how whacked they get by Utah in week 1 determines how they bounce back and play Kentucky in week 2. And if they end up getting absolutely annihilated week 1 because the Utah train, doesn't matter who's playing there, is exactly the same season in, season out. They do what Utah does.
Yeah.
If Florida aren't ready for that and they get whacked, and Kentucky turn up, they play Kentucky the following week, and Kentucky are fairly good with Will Levis. I think an 0-2 start for these young Florida Gators team could spell capitulation before the season's even really started. So I think it will be a huge test for the Gators in the first 2 weeks of the season.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it really will.
And then at 6, we got the Missouri Tigers last year. They were 3-5 in the conference, 6-7 overall, and they lost a narrow 24-22 loss to Army in the Armed Forces Bowl. As key players, offense, wide receiver Luther Burden, and then on defense, Ash, you've got Chris Abrams-Brain, cornerback.
Yeah, defense was difficult. I think this is another one of those teams that they play as a group. There's no real standout there from a defensive side. But I think I looked more long term and what potential impact they have at the next stage. And I think realistically, Chris Abraham's drain is probably going to be the only one. Brain is going to be the only one really that I can see being drafted. He's the leader in the secondary, and I think he will continue to be the leader this year in the secondary. But it's that offensive player, that Luther Burden, the wide receiver, the new recruit. He is a true freshman that everybody was so surprised when he selected Missouri. I think he was one of the top, if not the top, wide receiver in this recruitment class. But the potential this kid has is scary, and he's going to a team under Drinkwitz that is an offensive-minded coach. We're going to see Burden lining up across the wide receiver positions. He can play in all three. He's got the size, the speed, the power. Just to, I think, day one, maybe not day one. It might take him a couple of weeks to get up to full speed, but he should be an exceptional talent, and I think he's going to be the key factor for Missouri this year. It's going to sort of live and die by him, in my opinion. They've got their schedule is really, yeah, it is tough. Fortunately, they start, I'd say, pretty easy. They've got LA Tech week 1. I can see that they should comfortably win that. They play Kansas State, who have, they've been competitive the last couple of years, but I think they should be able to get the victory over Kansas State. And they've got ACU, which I think will be a comfortable victory. But then from there's maybe 1 or 2 games that are, I'd say it's probably one game. Vanderbilt as well, maybe, but NM State at the end of the year. But apart from that, they've got some huge games. They've got Auburn week 4, which is going to be a really difficult game. Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, Tennessee, Arkansas, Kentucky. I see them finishing 6-6 because they've got those easier games, and I see them picking up a result against Auburn, which will put them 6-6. But apart from that, I can't see them getting any more than 6 wins unless they turn up against South Carolina or Kentucky. But you've seen over the last 3 teams that we've spoken about, South Carolina, Florida, Missouri, all on 6-6. This conference is going to be so close, and it's going to be decided between them all playing each other, and they do all play each other. And I think Missouri, unfortunately, are going to be the team that are going to pick up losses against both Florida and Kentucky. Florida and South Carolina, which will unfortunately push them to 6th. But it really does. I mean, Luther Burden is the exciting player here that I think is just, if I would say one thing about Missouri this year, just watch out for Luther Burden.
Didn't Travis Hunter go? Wasn't he the number 1 wide receiver recruit?
Yes, Luther Burden. I think Luther Burden was definitely up there.
He was definitely up there.
He was, again, people were very surprised that he decided to choose Missouri, but it's going to be so interesting to see how he does there as the key piece. It's not often that you get to see a wide receiver as the it guy. It's usually a quarterback with the wide receiver, not just a wide receiver. So obviously, if their quarterback, Brady Cook, I think it is, if he struggles, obviously it's going to impact Luther Burden. But as soon as the ball's in his hands, he's just going to light up the field.
We talked about a tough schedule there for Missouri. I don't think they come tougher than Vanderbilt's schedule, Ash. Obviously, they were a 0-8 in conference last year, 2-10 overall. They didn't have a bowl game. We'll get to their key players in a second. Ash, you've got them as 1-11 in this season coming up with their sole win against Elon. They play Hawaii in week 0, so we'll see how the Commodores start the season in week 0. Then they do get Elon in week 1, and from there on out it is loss after loss after loss all the way up to 11. But if you look at their schedule, I mean, they play Wake Forest last year, obviously slightly different outfit this year, but decent teams. They play Alabama, Ole Miss, Georgia, Missouri, South Carolina, Kentucky, Florida, Tennessee. I mean, for a school that is on the rebuild and is trying to do things that Vanderbilt haven't done in a long, long time, this schedule is absolutely brutal.
It really is, yeah. I mean, Hawaii is the question mark game. Hawaii are a good team, but they're not a great team. I think that's going to be the closest to another victory for me, that week 0 game. But apart from that, I think even despite the losses that Wake Forest have had in the off season in terms of their players, they are still a much better outfit for me. It's going to be a massive shock to see Vanderbilt pick up more than 1, possibly 2 victories. Unfortunately, it's just not a good program. It's just the team and the coach and staff. It's just they just struggle year in, year out, and I just don't see that changing this year, unfortunately.
Yeah, agreed. Poor old Vandy, eh? Poor old Vandy. So I just had an NFL alert pop up there. If you got my face really close to the camera, right? Let's talk about the West Division then. And obviously, well, I say obviously, Alabama do top the West Division. This is probably right, Ash. 7-1 last year, 13-2 overall. They had the college football playoff semi-final at Cotton Bowl, which they beat Cincinnati handily, which was more one-sided than perhaps we thought. They then they beat Georgia, as we said, in the SEC Championship, and then lost in the Natty, as we all know. Key players, Bryce Young on offense and Will Anderson on defense. We talked about these guys for long enough, Ash. Is there anything more we can say about them before we hit the schedule?
No, not really. We've spoken about them in great details in the reviews. They're 1-1 in offense and defense players this year. As they're number 1 offensive player, number 1 defensive player, and that's probably what we'll see in the draft. But yeah, they're just crazy. I think the only thing for the Bama offense, which we've spoken about in the player reviews when we spoke about Bryce Young, is the weapons really there for him? He's obviously got Latu at tight end. Jermaine Burton's coming in as a transfer. Jamar Gibbs as a transfer. But it's just there is those massive names that we come to expect with Bama. So it'd be interesting to see how he performs with those guys. But I don't expect him to struggle at all.
No.
And then obviously Will Anderson is the best defensive player in the country. By a long shot, there's no one close to him, and I can't see anyone getting close to him this year at all. He's just wherever he lines up, whether it's edge, outside linebacker, inside, he absolutely dominates. It's the games for me. I've got them 12-0 as my prediction, but it's probably a closer 12-0 than Georgia, just because of them playing Texas in week 2. That is the Big 12 Texas Longhorns. I think that's going to be a great game. They're away as well, Bama, and Texas have done an unbelievable job in the offseason in terms of their recruits and their transfers. So if they could all gel together well, they will give Bama a real test. And then week 6, Texas A&M. Texas A&M are the next closest team to me for Bama and Georgia. and these two guys are playing each other. I still think Bama will get the victory against them, but that's going to be a massive test. They are fortunate that they are the home team. Alabama are the home team. And then the other game I picked out is week 10 away to LSU. You could probably also put in the week 8 or 7 game against Tennessee. That's going to be a very intriguing game. And then they've also got Arkansas on their schedule. So they do have some big games that will be close games. We saw Arkansas last year take them right up to the edge, and I think that could be the same again this year. But for me, I think they have got enough on offense and defense. Just even if you just look at those two guys that we've spoken about, I think they've got enough to go 12-0. But then they've also got players around them. They've got Jordan Battle on the defensive side, Henry Tutu in the linebacker. We mentioned Jermaine Burton. We need to see what we're going to see from him. But Jermaine Gibbs is a great running back. And their offensive line is one of the best in the country. Be very interesting. That Texas A&M game week 6 is the one for me. If they're going to slip up, that's the game they're going to slip up on, I think, in my opinion, at least anyway.
Yeah, if both teams, we're going to talk about the Aggies in a sec, but if both these teams start absolutely fire, that could be a fire and brimstone clash week 6, couldn't it? It could be an absolutely massive game.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk some Aggies then. Last year they were 4-4 in conference, finished 8-4 overall. They didn't have a bowl game because it was cancelled due to COVID. That was the Gator Bowl. On offense, Devin Akane, running back, and then defense, Antonio Johnson, safety. Ash.
Yeah, they struggled at times last year with some of their games, but they had some big injuries. Haynes King obviously went down injured, and Zach Calzada had to come in as the backup. They've now got Max Johnson as the transfer from LSU, who's going to push Haynes King straight off the bat. They've also got Connor Weigman, I can't remember if he's 4-star or 5-star freshman. He's going to challenge them. I don't think he'll take the step up as the start of this year, but he's certainly going to challenge them. Texas A&M's recruitment this year and 2023 is like nothing we've ever seen. It's absolutely exceptional. Evan Stewart, wide receiver. We spoke about Luther Burden earlier. Evan Stewart is arguably better than Luther Burden. They've got Anis Smith, who is in his senior year at wide receiver as well. And then on the defensive side, they've obviously got Antonio Johnson, who is the safety / nickelback. He plays in both those positions, but he's the standout on the defensive side for me at the moment. But there's some freshman guys here that could step up year one and overtake him and be comfortably the best player. They've got Shahar Stewart, the edge. They've got Gabriel Brownlow-Dindy, the defensive end. Just those two guys on their own are exceptional talents, and they've got both of them. They've got Jacoby Matthews, who is the top-rated safety in the class that's gonna push to be alongside Anthony Johnson day one. This team is set up so well with their blend of their seniors, their older players, and then this new injection of youth that they've got coming in. They're just a really exciting and somewhat unknown team. I've got them going 9-3, somewhat due to their schedule. I think they've got a little bit of an easier schedule. They have got Sam Houston, who are one of the top teams in the FCS, but they are, of course, when we spoke about it a few weeks ago, taking the step up to the FBS. Sorry, the other way around. But that is them week 1. That's going to be an interesting game, but I do think Texas A&M are going to be able to overcome them. The big games for me, they've got Miami week 3. I think that's going to be an intriguing game. Then they've got Arkansas week 4. Arkansas, I think, should be as good, if not better, than they were last year. And then they've also got LSU to end the year in week 13. Outside of that, they're playing South Carolina. They've obviously got Bama that we spoke about with the Bama game. That week 6 matchup is going to be a really intriguing affair. I just hope that Texas A&M can get there undefeated as well, but they're going to have to go through Miami and Arkansas first. I do think they will. Actually, I've put Miami down as beating them. Yeah, I just think, despite Texas being at home, I just think Miami are going to come into town as maybe an unknown commodity, because I don't know what to expect from them this year. Much like I'm confident with Texas A&M because of what I've seen, the new recruits and the players that they brought in from transfer, but they are going to have to gel together around those more well-established players. So it's going to be very intriguing to see how that starts. We'll see that after a couple of weeks, but I don't know. I just see Miami coming into town and causing an upset. I hope not. I would rather I be wrong and they enter the week 6 game against Alabama at 5-0, but I just see Miami as a bit of a banana skin here. And then I've also got LSU beating them to end the year. I think LSU, I don't think they're going to have an amazing year, but the victories that they pick up, I think they're going to be some surprising victories that they pick up. Obviously, we'll get onto them later. But yeah, I'm expecting big things from Texas A&M, but it is a young program, so it really could go one way or the other this year.
Yeah, it's massively paper-based at the minute. Until we see what happens on the football field, it is all paper-based. You mentioned Arkansas, the Razorbacks. Ash, last year, only 4-4 in conference, 9-4 overall. They did win their bowl game, the Outback Bowl, 24-10 against Penn State. KJ Jefferson as their key player on offense, the quarterback, and then on defense you got Bumper Pool, linebacker. That's a great name for a footballer, isn't it? Bumper Pool.
Yeah, we always love the interesting names, but I think Bumper Pool is the standout for me on the defensive side from what we saw last year. He is now probably one of their key guys, but he is good in terms of reading the plays, in particular on the run plays. He's got good agility, good overall athleticism, and his instincts to find the ball as well, whether that be in the air or when he's in the run defense, tracking down the running back and bringing him down. I think that is that's what puts him as sort of the top guy for me on the defensive side. KJ Jefferson as the quarterback, he's had some up and down years in his college career. At one point, he was spoken about as one of the top guys in college. I think that's unfortunately died a death, but he is still a very capable quarterback that can do good things with the ball in his hands. And Arkansas brought in Jaden Hasselwood from Oklahoma this year, who is going to be a key weapon for him, which has sort of put a bit more confidence for me this year into Jefferson. I think if Jefferson can have a good year, we should see a good year from Arkansas's offense, but it is the defense for me that is going to win these guys games like they did last year.
Yep.
The schedule is it's actually a really tough schedule. It's probably one of the toughest in this conference. They start the year off with their out-of-conference game against Cincinnati. We saw what Cincinnati were like last year. Yes, they've lost some big players. Desmond Ridder, the prime example there, but they've lost some other key pieces as well. But Cincinnati are a well-run, well-drilled program, and I see that continuing. I think they will still be one of the top non-Power 5 teams coming into 2022, 2023. So that's going to be a great test for this Arkansas team to start off. They play South Carolina week 2. They've got Texas A&M in their schedule. They're away to BYU week 7, which is another key game I've highlighted. Again, BYU have lost some key pieces, but they've got some really exceptionally talented players there as well that I think will prove to be a very intriguing game. I mean, Jaron Hall in particular is going to cause all sorts of issues this year for BYU at the quarterback position.
He's got to stay fit.
He has to stay fit. If he can, he's going to have a blinding year. But Arkansas, they've got LSU, they've got Missouri, they play Bama. I've got them going 9-3. I believe they'll beat Cincinnati week 1. I think they'll be able to beat South Carolina, LSU, Ole Miss. I think they'll be able to overcome all of those teams. The teams that I've got them losing to are the obvious ones. Texas A&M, I say obvious. We've spoken about it before. On paper, it should be obvious, but Texas A&M is the one victory, the one loss. Bama, that is, again, I think it'll be a close game, but I do think Bama will be able to beat them quite comfortably come the end of the game. And then BYU, I think BYU will be able to overcome them. If Jaron Hall plays up to how we expect him to, along with the players around and Gunnar Romney at wide receiver, the transfer Christopher Brooks at running back, and their offense as a whole is a very solid offense. I just think they'll have enough to overcome Arkansas this season. But I do have them going 9-3, and I think they'll push Texas A&M. I've obviously got Texas A&M finishing second because of the victory over Arkansas, but that game when they play each other, which is really early on in the season, obviously it's week 4, could dictate which of these two teams are the best team in the West behind Alabama.
Yeah, you mentioned Gunnar Romney. Obviously, being an independent at BYU, he obviously last year stood in as quarterback in several games for when Jaron Hall went as backup quarter. And I know he does get snaps anyway. So as a sleeper, if you're playing college football fantasy, Gunnar Romney is a superb sleeper because he does get snaps at quarterback. That's just a sneaky one for it. Yeah, I think you're right, Ash. The Razorbacks, I think they're going to be good enough again this season to cause some upsets. They could even beat BYU, if things go right their way. And I agree. I think BYU will be the better football team, but I think that is the game that they could potentially win as well.
Yeah, I think that's the only maybe question mark on the games that I've done. I think at Texas A&M, I think Bama is going to be a clean loss by the end of the game. But yeah, BYU could really go either way.
That is legit one of my favourite things about the upcoming season is because BYU games are always late. I get to listen to them at work early in the morning when I'm mowing on the weekend on the BYU Cougars app. I cannot wait to listen to live football again on a Sunday morning. Listen to BYU. It's one of the best things about early season football for me. Moving on to the fourth team, we've got Ole Miss, the Rebels, 6-2 in conference last year, 10-3 overall, and they lost in the Sugar Bowl to Baylor 21-7. Key players on offense: Zach Evans, running back, superb player, and then defense, Troy Brown, linebacker.
Yeah, Troy Brown, the transfer from Central Michigan. I'm really excited to see him step up into the SEC because in the MAC he was quite comfortably the best linebacker, the best inside linebacker there. I think he was in the All MAC team 3 years in a row. And last year in particular, he had a ridiculous year for Central Michigan. So he's going to be taking the step into the SEC now. I'm really excited to see what he can do there. And I think he's going to be the key cog in this defensive side. On the offensive side, obviously Zach Evans, the transfer from TCU, I think he's gonna hit the ground running. One of the top running backs in the SEC in college football, and I think he will be in the 23 draft. They've also brought in Ulysses Bentley from SMU, another running back he's gonna push Zach Evans for snaps. I think he's gonna be the backup. He's gonna be the rotational option, but he's also there and has a solid backup to have. They brought in Jalen Robinson from UCF. Was he at UCF? He was at Oklahoma and UCF. I can't remember which one they've brought him in from, but he's now in the program as well as the wide receiver. And Jackson Dart, the quarterback, is obviously coming in to replace Matt Corral. So Matt Corral? Yeah, It was Matt Corral, wasn't it? Yeah, sorry, my mind went blank then. So they've got some really interesting pieces on the offensive side, but we have to remember they are all new players, so they are all going to have to gel together. Obviously, Jonathan Mingo, the wide receiver, is one of the only guys left from last year that impressed on the offensive side. Their offensive line is pretty well held together from last season. I think only the right tackle's gone, and they brought in a new transfer at right tackle, Mason Brooks. But apart from that, most of the offensive line is still intact from players that they had last year. So that is one positive. But if all of these offensive pieces at each of those key positions can gel well together, alongside obviously Troy Brown on the defensive side leading the defense, I think Ole Miss will. I expect them to have a pretty good year. I've got them 7-5 in terms of my prediction. They've got some easier games like Troy, Central Arkansas to start the year. They play Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech are an underrated team. They're not a great team, but they turn up against bigger programs and they play well. I do see Georgia Tech coming into town week 3 and beating Ole Miss. But they've got Ole Miss have got the likes of Tulsa on their schedule, Vanderbilt, Mississippi State, but then they also have games like Texas A&M, Alabama, Arkansas. I think those 3 games plus the Georgia Tech game, and I've also got Auburn in here as maybe a shock loss. I think Auburn are going to struggle. We'll get onto them shortly, but I think they're going to struggle this year. But I just have a suspicion that Auburn are going to rock up against Ole Miss and grab a victory against them. But yeah, I've got them 7-5. I think comfortably. I wouldn't even say comfortably. Like in the East, there's a couple of teams here that are pretty close together, but I think Ole Miss will sit above them by the end of the season.
Yeah, that's fair. Let's move on to another team who actually you've got a better record than last year, but sit 5th on this side of the conference, and that's the LSU Tigers. They were 3-5 in conference last year, 6-7 overall. It was a bit of a season of giving up, shall we say, for LSU last year. They didn't really appear to want to play top level football that we know and love from LSU. They did play in the bowl game, however, they got thumped 42-20 in the Texas Bowl by Kansas State. As I mentioned, pretty much looked like they gave up. Key players, offense and defense. Offense, there's only really one guy for us. That's Keishon Butte at wide receiver. And defense, BJ Ojulari, edge. Again, another couple of stellar players for LSU, actually.
Yeah, again, players that we spoke about in the top 50, so we probably don't need to add too much onto those two. But Brian Kelly has actually done a really good job in terms of his transfers and his recruitment for this year. They brought in Jaden Daniels as a quarterback who's gonna
start is what he's gonna do.
He's gonna start, yeah. I think Miles Brennan, as it stands, because he's the established quarterback from last year, despite being injured, will start in the camp as the starter. But Jaden Daniels will be their quarterback, if not by week 1, certainly by week 2 or 3, in my opinion. They brought in Noah Cain from Penn State, the running back, to go alongside John Emery Jr. They brought in on the defensive side, they've brought in a load of really interesting freshmen, like Quincy Wiggins, the defensive end. They've also got Ty Hill, the defensive tackle. Harold Perkins is the key one for their recruitment in the linebacker position. I think he was the top-rated recruit that they brought in. And they also brought in Emory Jones, the left guard, back on the offensive side as a freshman as well, who I think is going to have a very successful career at LSU and when he eventually gets to the NFL. But they just need to change that mindset they've had for the last couple of years under Ed Region. And I think Brian Kelly is a interesting character, but there is no disputing what he did at Notre Dame, and I think he will bring that to LSU, and I think we will see an improved LSU, but I think it might just take time. I've got them going 7-5 this year. I do have them improving on last year, but they've got some big games in there that are just, unfortunately, I just think are going to be a bit too much of them, like Tennessee, Alabama, Arkansas. I've got them losing again to Auburn. I mentioned Auburn a minute ago, beating Ole Miss. I've got Auburn beating LSU as well, and I've got Ole Miss beating LSU, which we've just spoken about. But the games that I see them winning, they've got some easier games to start the year, like Florida State, Southern U, MS State, New Mexico. I think they're going to be victories. They probably will be 4-0 by the time they hit week 5, which is when then they play Auburn. And I think that's one of the reasons why I think they're going to slip up against Auburn, because they've had a little bit of an easier run. Florida State, yes, they are a decent team, as are Mississippi State, but that Auburn game, I just see it being a banana peel, because they're going to be riding on such a high, and it's going to be a game that people aren't expecting them to lose. I think they are just going to slip up. I do, however, see them beating Texas A&M to finish the year, which we mentioned earlier about Texas A&M. Much like Auburn being a slip-up for LSU, I think LSU are going to be a slip-up for Texas A&M to end the year.
I want to say the winningest coach in Notre Dame history, Brian Kelly. Yes, he's a character. Unique is possibly a word I'd use to describe him. How... Obviously, 7-5. Of the teams you've got them losing to, Auburn, Tennessee, Ole Miss, Alabama, and Arkansas, Could we see it like a 10-3 record or something like that, or 10-2 record?
Quite easily. Yeah, Auburn, Ole Miss, Arkansas, and Tennessee. I think Auburn and Ole Miss are maybe my probably maybe a bit more extreme projections for LSU. Tennessee and Arkansas will be very tough games, and I think those two programs are more well established with what they've got. We've got to remember, obviously, Brian Kelly is new to town, and he's made a lot of changes, not just on his offensive and defensive schemes, but on obviously the roster as a whole. I just think Tennessee and Arkansas might be a step too far. Auburn and Ole Miss are a toss-up. They could well easily finish year 9-3 or 10-2, quite easily.
With Auburn beating LSU, you expect them to be at number 6, but no, the Mississippi State Bulldogs climb above Auburn to the number 6 spot in Ash's rankings here. We've got them, their 20-21-22 record reads 4-4 in conference, 7-6 overall, and they lost in the Liberty Bowl against Texas Tech 34-7. Key players on offense and defense. On offense, we've got Will Rogers, quarterback, and then defense, Nathan Pickering, defensive tackle.
Yeah, so like you say, you would expect to see Auburn above them if Auburn are going to be beating LSU. But I think Mississippi State have maybe got a slightly easier schedule overall. I think out of 2, which is going to be, I think there's going to be one game in it for me. I've got Mississippi State 5-7. I think they're going to be able to beat Memphis, which is going to be a tough game, but I do think they're going to be able to beat Memphis. They play Arizona, who I can see them beating quite easily. Bowling Green, I see them beating. I see them beating Auburn, which is the big. This is obviously where this is it. This is where it's going to dictate where these guys finish. They're playing each other week 11 or week 10. They play each other, so that is probably going to dictate which of these two teams is going to finish bottom of the West and which is going to finish 6th, in my opinion, at least. Anyway, I've got them losing to LSU, Texas A&M, Arkansas, Kentucky, Bama, Georgia, Ole Miss. Ole Miss and Kentucky are maybe the two, and LSU as well. I think they're 3 games that you could go, yeah, but maybe they can get a victory. But I think just overall, what I've seen from Mississippi State last year, what their roster looks like this year, I just can't see them doing anything too special. I think they are going to be, unfortunately, battling to not finish bottom of the West Division.
You know, it's absolutely fair. I just feel bad putting Auburn at 7. I don't know, I didn't do it, but I think you are right. I think Mississippi State have the better roster right now. I think the Auburn team that we've known from several years ago are in rebuild right now, with Bo Nix moving on and players leaving. The only player of real note that we're going to talk about in Auburn is their running back. We might as well dive straight into Auburn. Ash, last year 3-5, overall 6-7. They lost in the Birmingham Bowl 17-13 to Houston. Key players on offense, Tank Bigsby, man, their running back is one of the best running backs in college football right now. And then in defense, you've got Owen Pappoe, linebacker.
Yeah, central linebacker. For me, I expected him to declare this year, and I think he would have been one of those. He wouldn't have been a top talent, but I think he would have been one of those round day 2 guys that people would have been very surprised about when he eventually hits the NFL. He is a very athletic and intelligent player. He's got the speed and the explosiveness that you love to see from a linebacker, but he's got the smarts to close the ball down, to be in the right positions, and he just seems to lead the field as well. I like the potential that's there. He is slightly raw, but I do like the potential from Owen Pappoe, and I'm very intrigued to see him this year, and hopefully when he gets picked up by an NFL team. Obviously the offense is a lot easier. It is Tank Bigsby. He is, like you say, one of the best, if not the best, running backs in this in college football. They've obviously also brought in Zach Calzada as the quarterback, and Robbie Ashford from Oregon, we can't forget as well. That's going to be a fight for that for the Auburn job. And they've also got the lad that transferred last year from LSU, who was a backup. TJ Finley. So he was a backup at LSU, but he's also there as well. This isn't as straightforward as Zach Calzada walking in and taking this job by no means. They're going to be battling for the quarterback position. But this is the Tank Bigsby show. It's going to be all year. The projection is wrong. It should be 5-7 because I've got them beating Ole Miss. So that's a mistake. But I think them and Mississippi State are both going to finish 5-7. The reason that Auburn are going to finish bottom is because I have Mississippi State beating Auburn. That is going to be the difference for me. That's why that game is going to be so crucial. Auburn's schedule, however, they haven't got an easy start. They play Mercer, who I think is going to be a comfortable win for them. San Jose State is going to be a really difficult test. San Jose State are one of those non-Power 5 teams that are one of the top non-Power 5 teams. So that's going to be a very interesting challenge for them. I do see them having enough to overcome them, but it's going to be a very intriguing test. I see them picking up those victories against LSU and Ole Miss that we mentioned earlier, but the rest of their schedule is really difficult. They've got Penn State, Missouri, I think, are a better team than them this year. Georgia, obviously, Arkansas, Mississippi State, which we've mentioned, Texas A&M, and Alabama. So they have got a really difficult schedule outside of that Mercer game. All of the other games are going to be either they're coming up against teams that are much better than them, or they're going to be really intriguing close games like Ole Miss, LSU, Missouri, Mississippi State. The Auburn could quite easily be 7-5, or they could be 6-6, 5-7. They could be 4-8. It's such an unknown because there's not really, apart from Tank Bigsby, there just isn't anything here that really jumps out at you. And they're another team that have got a new quarterback coming in. So I just think it's a transitional year for them. And unfortunately, I do see them finishing bottom of the West.
That's fair. I think you're right. Transitional year, bottom of the West. And the rest of the West is pretty strong. And it's the
West as a whole is an incredibly strong outfit. I mean, once you get past Arkansas, there's 1 or 2 games in between 4th to 7th. You could say the same about the East as well. Apart from Vanderbilt, they're all 6-6. I've gotten 6-6 and 7-5 on like 3 or 4 teams. There's probably 4 teams for me that are clear. 5 if you include Arkansas, because Texas A&M and Arkansas, Alabama, Tennessee, Georgia. Alabama and Georgia, clear. The rest of them, there are question marks over the rest of those other 3 teams. They're all teams that have either had a lot of changes, Tennessee and Texas A&M, or had a great year last year in Arkansas that I expect to see the same, but it's not guaranteed. So the SEC is going to be a very, very interesting year for them, more so than we've seen in a few years. There's some massive teams that could really go one way or the other.
Yeah, and after this year, the SEC gets bigger with the inclusion of Texas and Oklahoma. So yeah, it's going to be SEC here, there, and every year from here on out. I think with the strength of the conferences as a whole. But yeah, conference realignment is something we're probably going to have to touch on at some point or other. Ash, anyway,
yeah,
Ash, we've done it, mate. We've gone through a whole show doc in 1 week and not had to stop and do a second podcast.
Yes,
very happy with that. Thanks as always, my man, for sorting out the show doc. You've done a stellar job as always with that. What's next up? Where are we heading next? Where are we diving into next up? What are we saying?
I'm not sure who we're going to go for. It's either going to be the ACC or Big Ten, I reckon.
All right, no, that's fine. I'm down.
It'll be one of them. I think what the plan is we'll get shows out for the Power 5, and then we'll have a show maybe with the group of 5 together. Originally, we wanted obviously to have them all separate, but due to issues outside of the podcast, that's not obviously been possible. So yeah, we'll definitely get the Power 5 and a group of 5 podcast done before the start of the season.
Yes, sir, indeedy. Ash, I am super pleased the SEC is out of the way, because although I now know it is Arkansas, I hate the way it is written. Pleased to see the back end of the Razorbacks. Ash, I will speak to you real soon. Rush Nation, don't forget to head over to the website and check out all the articles over there, because especially for fantasy football, the season is coming in hot and fast right now. There is a lot of content dropping over there. The FFCC starts very, very soon. So if you are in that, congratulations. Good luck. If you face me in the first round, well done. I haven't made it out of the first round ever, so it's pretty much a bye at this point. Ash nearly won it last year without even knowing. So between us, we've got a quarterfinal written in the cards. Listen, until the Big Ten or whoever else is next, Saturdays are for Rushing 2. And if you're still watching on the live stream, thanks very much. We appreciate you watching.